Well, thank you so much. I'm pleased to be here. Building capacity is something that I love to talk about. So today, we're going to be thinking about implementation across environments and shifting mindsets. So I'm Marlene Cummings. I'm by training a speech language pathologist. I'm also an AAC consultant currently. In my background, I ran classrooms, so I was the teacher as well as functioned as an AT consultant, designed an AT center. I also designed an AAC classroom for students with severe apraxia that we began implementing AAC with them pretty early, between 2 and 4 years old. And so my lens is a little bit different. I look at things from a classroom or a larger view. How can I leverage the environment to support all the students? And I've always looked at things through a capacity building lens without knowing what that word meant. So we're going to talk today a little bit more about that. I want you to know what we're going to be talking about. So we have 4 major categories or topics we're going to discuss. We're going to talk about mindset, moving from an expert to a collaborative model, what capacity building really is through a certain kind of definition, and then how does dynamic professional learning impact the ability to build capacity. And when we think about our learning outcomes, we're going to hopefully when you leave here, you can describe 3 aspects of capacity building. You can identify 3 benefits of a collaborative model, and you can list 3 ways to build capacity within your environment or your workplace. So all of you should have been able to connect, which was just shared with you earlier, a capacity building implementation plan. Even though this is a 1-hour webinar, my hope is that you will be a continual learner so that you'll walk away thinking about this in your current placement. So I've listed the components and they may be out of order on the one that you've got. So just fill it in as we get to that category. I want you to be thinking about your current status, your current state, what next steps you'd like to take in terms of what team you might want to meet with, what conversations you might want to have, what continual learning you might want to engage in. And at the end, I want you to prioritize where you're going to start. I spoke earlier that with some colleagues of how many file cabinet drawers I had filled with presentations, that I have a 2 terabyte Dropbox to keep all the presentations. I don't want that to be the case with you, that it's like stored somewhere, never to be seen again. So that's why I have you do this action plan so that when you walk away and on Monday or next week, you're continuing to think about what you learned today. So our first topic is mindset, and mindset matters. Change your mind, change your perspective. So when we think about mindset, it's an established set of attitudes held by you or someone. It's a collection of beliefs that shape your thought habits. And we're hearing a lot nowadays about our thinking and how our thoughts dictate things, how it impacts our body and our health. So think about this. A mindset is strengthened and forged by thoughts, information, which you believe to be true. So the impact of what we believe, right, is pretty powerful. So today you're not going to walk away with a set of ideas, activities that you can start right away on Monday implementing. But my hope is that you walk away with a set of questions and wonders about how you or your organization, your classroom, your team can build capacity. So years ago, I was doing a lot of planning and desiring to impact my district, design some classroom programs, and discovered that I needed to get the directors, the administrators on board. And in that process, I discovered, this is how I coined it, that our beliefs become our thoughts become our feelings become our actions, and our actions are what others see. And I bring this to your attention because many times if we're having a conflict, if there's a barrier, if there's some team member that doesn't seem to be on board with us, we need to track back to what they believe about what we're doing. So do they believe in the goal that that student has? Do they understand what we're trying to accomplish? Because their actions may be deceiving us and we won't necessarily understand where they're coming from. So many of you, I'm sure, have heard about the growth versus the fixed mindset. So when we're thinking about capacity building, we're going to want to sit in that growth mindset. We want to sit in a place that says, I still have more questions. We want to sit in a place that says, I don't know everything. So even the strategies I'm applying now may not be valuable for the next week, month, year. We know, especially in the field of AAC, that research is kind of busting out all over, right? And I've been in the field a long time, and we used to do things that were like, I can't believe I did that, right? As the new research comes out, it was like, well, that doesn't work and we shouldn't have been doing that. But we were doing the best we knew to do at the time. But we still have to be willing to grab new things, to embrace a new way of thinking about things. So I want you to think about what I just said regarding mindset. I want you to look at your action plan, and I want you to think about what's the current state in the mindset of your team or your group, the people that you want to influence. What are the next steps you want to take? What do you want to dig around a little bit more in mindset? What might that look like? And then ultimately we will prioritize. So I'm just going to give you a minute to think about mindset. Okay, so we're going to move on here. And again, you've got your action plan in front of you, so you can keep adding pieces as you go. Embracing a collaborative model. So I spoke earlier, we're moving from that expert model to a collaborative model. Only influences here, no experts. So what we found is when we function out of an expert model, an expert mode, it is pretty personality or person dependent versus system dependent. There's a book called Outliers that was really powerful in a season when I read it. And it talked about having 10,000 hours of knowledge, practice, experience with something, and that could potentially make you an expert. And that because of the amount of work, the digging deep that you've done. And that's pretty powerful. We also know when we think about an expert status or an expert model, there's a risk of gatekeeping depending on the field and what role you're playing. I know in AAC, sometimes we have an expert and they might look at a team and say, you're not ready for this, or you're not going to be able to handle this, or, right? There's that risk. We also know that if you're in the same kind of system I am right now, there is a strain on experts or even people that have expertise. We have a situation where I live that there's a team that does AAC evaluations, and there's a 1-year wait list. So let's think about the impact that has on a 3-year-old, where we could get something going right away, implementation right before assessment. We could get some universal supports in place rather than wait an entire year for that powerful AAC assessment, which I'm not disagreeing with, but we need to get started sooner than that. So that strain logistically is very real. I don't want you to think it's all or nothing. And I have somebody in my life that kind of shifts that way. It's we're going to do it completely or we're not going to do it at all. Okay. We don't want to think that way. We do want knowledgeable people on our team. We want people with enormous expertise in different areas. We want to collaborate cross-professionally, but we want it to be collaboration. We want to take that expertise and use it powerfully, but not consider that person to be the expert in everything. What we know is that communication happens everywhere. So we need to think about that broader communication environment and all the people needed to impact those students learning in that communication environment. So we need to think about what that would look like for you and all the different expertise we need to truly develop competent communicators, those students that can use AAC proficiently. So this I find is a very powerful slide. So if you start your conversations with people, this might be where you get started. What is your sphere of influence? Where is it? How broad is it? How narrow is it? These are things I want you to think about for yourself. So what do you know? What is your expertise? What level of knowledge do you have in the field or in that specific area, whether it's emergent literacy or AAC or aided language input or vocabulary instruction or AT? And then ask yourself, what do you need to learn? So I teach classes in some situations where I develop a continual learning plan, right? We're not going to know everything. And then as soon as we know it, it changes. But what do I still need to learn? Then I want you to ask yourself on the other side, who can I influence? What is my sphere of influence? Who are the people that I could potentially change their minds? And I developed and started thinking about influence long before everybody became an influencer, right, in social media, in the fact that we often think of leaders have influence. Well, let's call them influencers then, because not everybody sees themselves as a leader, but they often will coin themselves an influencer in their environment. And then I need you to ask yourself, how can you make the biggest impact? How can you leverage what's already happening? Universal supports or universal AT, whatever it is, how can you make the biggest impact? So we're going to think about that collaborative piece. We're going to think about partners, partnerships. Let's do this together. We need to leverage everyone's skills. Let the village be the village. Who is everyone? Think about those people in your environment, teachers, communication partners, families, paraprofessionals. Who are all those people that we're thinking about when we're having partnerships? I want you to consider the view of similarities of students rather than differences. So how can we take similarities in learning styles, in the kind of AAC they have, in their skill profile? And let's think about the power of universal strategies and supports. How can we impact the entire group? What can we do in their instruction and those instructional strategies that can support most of the students at the same time? And then I want you to think about, we will need to determine specific student needs, but can we think about solutions that can impact most versus just a few? Now, will we have those times when we're going to have to find a very specific solution for a very specific student? Yes, but that shouldn't be all the time. That should, most of the time, the solutions that we determine should impact more than a few students or more than a few classrooms. So this is one way I describe it, a strength-based collaboration. So I want you to think about yourself and your team. Are there aspects of the work that only you can do as the expert? So you're kind of it, right? You're the one. Are there things that we need to do, tasks, development or design of something that we can share, right? That we could collaborate together. And then what are those things that you can support someone else in beginning to do where they just do it then, right? That isn't, you don't even have to be involved over time. Here's just a few things you want to consider. Could it be in the assessment process? So I know many times we use the communication matrix and we may have multiple people be filling that out. Somebody may get it started, but others may then join in where we, the result is this powerful compilation of perceptions about a student and where they're at. Could it be developing goals together rather than separately, right, in our silos? Progress monitoring, lesson planning. We often have teams that put a lesson plan together on Google, and in a Google Doc, and they're all submitting pieces of that? Is it AAC strategies, instructional strategies, device updating and maintenance, right? So you could think of a myriad of things that have to be done, and then think about this hierarchy that we just talked about. So we talked about influencer, become an influencer instead of an expert. What are some parts that you might want to consider? Well, as an influencer, you can build capacity, right? You're going to be empowering others, informing others, supporting others. You're going to have them share their story. So you're going to share yours, but imagine a set of stories that teams are able to tell about all the things that they've done. That's an influencer. That's somebody that's going to change someone else's mindset by their personal experience. We're going to need to expand shared knowledge. An influencer does that, right? It builds on the knowledge we have and expands it. You're going to see more deepened implementation, like the deep work, the hard work that truly changes practice and also changes the lives of the people that we serve. We're going to create a communicative environment. It's not just when that expert comes in the room. We're going to have an environment that is ignited, right, with an expectation of communication happening. And ultimately, we're shifting a culture. We're shifting an entire group of people that now have shared knowledge, that have a shared mindset, and that are moving things forward in a different way. So I want you to go back, and I think your action plan might have this reversed. I want you to think about that expert versus collaborative model. What's your current status, the team you're in, you personally, and what are some next steps you want to take in your continual learning? So I'm going to give you just a second to fill that out and be thinking about that. Okay, so we're going to keep going so that we can finish on time. I will stay later for questions that you might have. And hopefully, you've got your action plan up so you can keep filling it in as other things pop to mind. Then we're going to talk about some of the definitions and some of the pieces of building capacity. The goal is creating sustainable impact. We need to create something that lasts over time. So capacity building, collaborative and multi-tiered. And you're going to hear a lot about capacity building. I've seen several different PowerPoints and presentations. Some people think about it student by student, one person at a time. Other people sometimes think of it too broadly and don't dig a little deeper into all the components of it. So hopefully we're going to do a little of both. So one of the key features of capacity building is, why would I do it, right? What's different about what I'm doing now than becoming a capacity builder? So why should my school or program consider moving away from relying on that expert model? So this is something that's really important in this day right now, the climate we're in. I don't know about you, but we're kind of running amok. We've got people leaving. We've got brand new people coming in. We've got people not even fully certified getting going. We've got people moving into classrooms that have no experience with that population or that age group. We've got new administrators that are excited to show up really well and have never been an administrator at the level they are now. We've got a lot of changes happening. And that expert that we counted on in that program is now somewhere else, out of county, out of state, not even in the field anymore. So we've got some maneuvering to do in this season of new normal, right? Some other things that you might want to think about when building capacity and why would be, you've got some outcomes that you've had for a while in your organization, your group, your team, and they're not clear, right? We're not on the same page. We've got to get everybody fully understanding what those outcomes look like. We also have some experiences where we've got some outcomes, but the progress is not looking good. We've had either changes in staff, things that have happened, and we've got to get right back in deeply to think about those outcomes. And oftentimes it means expanding our team, expanding the influence, the capacity, the understanding. Another thing, when we talk about collaboration, that means we're doing something with people. We're partnering. And do we have partners that have left? Do we have partners we need to add to really develop what we want to do, those powerful outcomes, and then build capacity and increase our influence to others? So think about why you might even consider this or why you came on this webinar. So capacity building is a process. And this is what it's for. It's to develop and strengthen skills, instincts, abilities, processes, and resources. For what reason? So that the organizations we're in can survive, adapt, and thrive. And we say in this fast changing world, I'm telling you, those words have never been more meaningful and more challenging. Surviving right now, adapting, and thriving with everything that we've seen change in the past during the pandemic and even a bit prior to that. So let's think about the key to a capacity building approach. The first thing we need to do is develop common or shared knowledge. And so I can speak to that pretty specifically. So when I joined the organization I'm currently in, we had some opportunities to do some changes. Some of the model of our service delivery was changing. We were able to add a consultant. So lots of shifts that we had open to us. So we started thinking about how are we going to get AAC going in a more powerful way across this large county. And we discovered quite challengingly that we did not have shared knowledge across the districts. So we would ask a question and we would get 20 answers or 10 answers. Even amongst us consultants, as we started digging around in this work, we discovered, oh, I thought that meant that. Oh, I view that this way, right? Different lenses, different views. We need to develop common or shared knowledge. We also need to focus on fewer than more goals. We need to get very clear about those goals. They need to be precise, and we need to know how we're going to get there, because otherwise we're not even going to know we got there, right? We're not going to know we hit that outcome because we didn't develop those goals well enough or we developed too many. The other thing that you need to consider is we need to sustain this effort over time. Many of you, I'm sure, are in schools or organizations where every other day it seems like the outcome is changing. Now we're shifting over here. Now we're shifting over here. We can't ever get leverage or get our feet on the ground, right, to dig in before we change. So when you start thinking about capacity building, you need to create the common knowledge and the goals that can be sustained over multiple years. What about the people? So as this approach is embraced, the people that are part of it will dig deeper. They will become learners that are digging deeper into the implementation rather than that surface knowledge. And if you haven't already, I would encourage you to dig around in implementation science. We've been doing it for a while, and it's causing some very powerful impact for us as we think about reflection. So the next point is, what does it look like for someone to reflect on their practice, reflect on what they're doing, and then be not only willing, but able to tweak that a bit, right? To look a little bit differently. Oh, wow. So I'm reflecting on this, and boy, that goal surely didn't work, or that strategy was a bomb, right? Don't want to do that next time. So that process of reflecting, you'll see a lot of times in professional learning and on some of the websites that there's self-reflection forms that people can stay. It's not to discourage, it's to say, oh, okay, these are the 5 steps I need to think about. Whoa, I haven't even started on step 2 yet, right? So reflection. The other piece we're seeing, if we're building capacity, is problem solving that isn't left to just one person. So it isn't left to the AT person or the building tech person or the AAC consultant or expert or that one person in the classroom that is that incredible tech person or problem solving person. We want problem solving to be generated across the entire organization. And we want problem solving to look like I talked earlier through a lens that says, if I solve this problem in this way, could that help all these other problems that keep arising to be able to be solved? So problem solving across the organization. What do we get from impact? So if we're doing this, what does it really do? What's the outcome? Well, we're finding, as I talked about earlier, it develops a culture. People are start to do this the same way or alike or similar, so that if you come into a building or you come into a district, it has a culture, a feel to it, right? There's something you can identify about that. It also accelerates the speed of change. So when everybody's on the same page, it's almost like you're finishing their statement for them, right? Very quickly, we see different people taking on different roles. Here, I can take care of that. Oh, here, I can do that. And we're doing it together so that change is not so grueling, right? It's not so difficult. It also does foster sustainability, right? So I have teams now that even happened this year. I have new people that join teams. I reach out and they're like, oh, we're all set. Susie and John met with me, or so-and-so met with me. They gave me the notebook they follow, or they gave me the goals. They gave me that foundational information. I've already, signed up for your foundational series because I know I need it. So the individual players begin to play that role of developing that sustainability because they're looking out for their peers and their colleagues. They're an influencer. It also reinforces the strategy and skill implementation. And I know in our field, specifically AC, but I also work in literacy, that we often have that cursory knowledge, that beginning knowledge, but we haven't developed those deep skills. So we're still sitting in that less than amazing place of being able to impact our students. So now we're going to talk just a moment about those learners. So we think about the teachers, right? The parapros, the families. Who is it that has to get that basis of shared knowledge and those implementation strategies going? And this is what we find when we do capacity building. The teams are working with the individuals. They have a better understanding of the theory and research underlying the skill. Now, I was one of those people that when I would go to a training, I wanted something to be able to apply on Monday, right? I wanted those 5 activities, or, oh, they have 10. I'm going to make sure that I download all 10. But the question I have to ask when we do that is, do they know why we developed the 5 or the 10 activities we did? And if we did, right, what are we going to do when we want strategy 11, or I'm sorry, activity 11? Right? Do I even know what needs to go into designing that activity if I never knew the theory and research behind it? Now, I know the complaints because I do lots of professional learning, but it took you half a day to give us the theory and research, and only now are we getting to the lesson planning and the specific skills. My hope is that by giving you that theory and understanding, that it's going to be that much faster for you to grab, right, the lesson planning model or the activity design model. The other thing is it gives us the opportunity to observe multiple demonstrations. So in this model, you want to be able to see and see and see all the different ways this can happen. One of the advantages of the pandemic, I try to look for the good ones, is that we have so many more videos now of people doing native language input, of people doing alternate formats for certain kids. It is amazing because one of the challenges we had was people would say, can you show me what that looks like? Well, you need to let me observe in your classroom and videotape if I'm going to have the model to do that, right? So we're in a better place there, but it allows that observation of multiple demonstrations. And then the most powerful part, practice and feedback, whether it's in a simulated situation, in a classroom, on a video, whatever, but we need to practice it. We need to figure it out and get feedback. And I don't mean critical feedback. We need powerful critiques and even our own self-reflection to figure out where we are with that, right? We need to practice. And I know for me, I'll go to some tech training or something, and I'll get home and what button do I push? Where do I start? Right? But if we get to practice that in a safe environment, then I'm going to figure out those pieces that I need to practice and get better at. So we're looking at ourselves as an influencer. We're looking at ourselves as a collaborator. We're looking at ourselves as a capacity builder. So it's completely different, right, than I'm the expert. I'm the one that you can depend on to bring that knowledge to the table. So these are some of the things that you might be seeing. Embrace a collaborative model, recognizing the skills of the entire team. What's the expertise that the team is bringing? Strategically insert the expertise of that expert, right? And think about, let me move this. So think about clarifying what can be done by others, what has to be done by you, what can we share, and what are the pieces of that, the when, the why, and the what of that expert. What are they bringing, and when do we truly need that expert? Also, we need to connect the dots between AAC and language for the SLPs. With this huge influx of new technology and the bells and whistles of all the tech that and what it can do, we need to remember that this is really about language. So the bells and whistles help us, but we have to have language growing for that individual before we can do much with the bells and whistles. We need to shift the focus of implementation to the classroom, right? And most of you will go, okay, yeah, that's true. But what exactly does that look like? Right? So what happens in the classroom? We have to get the entire classroom team on board. We need to look at the implementation in the classroom and how can I come in as the expertise, the expert, and influence that implementation? What does that look like to do that together now? We need to fill in that serious AAC shared knowledge gap. And we've got lots of trainings out there now, which is really wonderful to begin to do that. We also need to consider the classroom-based strategies. So one of the things we've been doing a lot is we're looking at communication and realizing it doesn't happen in a vacuum, but it can happen powerfully during emergent and conventional literacy strategies, that explicit instruction. So how do we support AAC systems and that support in that way so that in that classroom, right, we're supporting expressive and receptive language during that instructional time. And then we need to determine and apply specific student supports with long-term solutions in mind. So we often will have a short-term solution we have to make, right? But we've discovered in some of the things we're doing that implementing eye gaze and supporting eye gaze for a student, you might not have a lot of students and you might have one every few years. So can we provide a support group and training monthly to figure out eye gaze solutions and those kinds of things? That's a long-term solution, creating that group, versus we're going to go every single time there's a challenge with eye gaze or a challenge with some other sophisticated communication system and support. Can I move over here? Let's see. So I want you to think about those capacity building pieces that I brought up. And I'm going to look at a couple of the questions and see if I can answer those, but go back to your action plan and think about what is your current status? Do you even think about capacity building? What does that look like? Or are you out trying to hire or find more experts? And then what are your next steps in that continual learning? So I'm just going to quickly address one of these questions about how do you kind of move past that expert of the gatekeeper, right? One person has access to getting buttons and those kinds of things. I think having that conversation, is there a possibility that we could have, you know, 2 or 3 buttons that we would use as classroom supports, and it might be the district buying it, or it might be coming from wherever, where you've got them ready so that you can use them with students that we're not applying it directly to them in their IEP yet, but we want to consider that use of that technology, that AAC support for those students. Another one. So yeah, how do you move people into that place of just not always counting on you? So one simple thing we've done is when people have a challenge, we have what we call a help desk, and we have them put in a ticket to the help desk. I don't do that anymore. I have them do that. And the reason I have them do it is, one, they can describe it better than me, right? Because now it's been translated through a couple people, and they put me on the ticket. So now I can see the progress and I can weigh in on it. but they're the ones that have brought the need, the concern, the problem to us rather than me doing that and being translated through me. So sometimes, and feel free to reach out. You've got my email, but we've got some solutions that we figured out that help that process a little more to slowly shift that mindset. We call it reciprocal responsibility. So we each have responsibility in a situation, and who has what responsibility and what does that look like? Okay, so hopefully you've added something to your action plan around capacity building. We're going to talk a little bit now about dynamic professional learning. So what we realized is to truly change and build capacity, and we needed to develop that shared knowledge, that needed to come through professional development, professional learning. So I'm going to give you just a snapshot of something we've done. So we've done this in AT, which is not represented here. We've done it in literacy. And then we've also done it in this framework for success, building competent communicators. So when we started, it's probably been 9 or 10 years ago. Where did we start? Well, we had a full expert model in place to secure AAC systems and supports. You had to come to me, you had to have me come out, and I kind of decided everything, right? I'd get your input, but it was all about me. We lacked shared knowledge significantly. That's, I told you, we kind of started wandering around going, oh my gosh, none of us are on the same page, or only a few. We did not have language on the radar. We had AAC for communication. So we had voice output. That was powerful, but the language sets we were using were greatly lacking. It did not embrace core as its roots. There were not necessarily robust communication systems in use. We had no or little access to symbolic language prior to an AAC referral. So we didn't have intervention before assessment. We didn't have kids having universal supports, core vocabulary, no tech, light tech that they could access before we decided, right, that big question of what's the communication system best for them. So step one was setting an overarching vision or outcome. We wanted to build competent communicators in our county. Step two is we're going to build capacity. We have to create a framework that is kind of a tiered collaborative model so we can all figure out where we fit, who does what, and how that looks. We also needed to address the barriers. And so we used the participation model through Buchelman and Marinda at the time. And what were the barriers that we were addressing? Let's see, I moved my mouse and then there we go. And so as we started this 5-year plan, we were going to provide AAC systems and implementation supports for users of AAC to become competent communicators. Overarching goal. Communicate a variety of communicative functions. So we wanted the students that we were serving to be able to novelly generate language, demonstrating a variety of purposes and functions. We use the Communication Bill of Rights as kind of our underlying grounding document. And then we needed to create a capacity building model to empower teams to influence those in their sphere of influence, right? So that was where we were going to get going. This is just a brief summary, and I presented several different times actually in different places around this, and for school districts. So we're going to design, develop, and deliver a foundational learning toolkit. We have to get at that foundational shared knowledge, and that's basically going to be, we're going to share content, right? That's its purpose. Then we developed and provided a very clear set of universal AAC supports that visibly represented language in order to support language development and language intervention, with that expectation that our kids are communicators and that's going to happen in the classroom environment. So we had multiple people give input on how we were going to design these universal supports and what that would look like. Then so now we've delivered that knowledge, right? We've delivered those beginning tools that they needed in that toolkit. And then we moved our model into the classroom. So we said, okay, we've given you this, but what does it look like to implement right in the classroom? This is where it happens, right? The rubber hits the road. And so we started doing what we call job embedded professional learning. We've written a bit about it and shared quite a bit about it of what does it look like for you, that team, to choose their goals based on our foundational learning toolkit that they wanted to embrace? And then we went in and helped them truly dig around in those goals and begin to implement those strategies. Then out of that, they started influencing the people in their immediate environment. And then the next piece was, what does it look like to expand that collaboration, that partnership beyond their classroom, their team, into that building, into the county? What does that look like? And so I'm going to share just a teeny bit about that next. We've done, again, lots of presentations on this. This is just a snapshot for you, because my goal today is to change your mind, to think about capacity building and think about how you might apply that to your specific building, team, whatever is in your environment, whoever you're connecting with. So this is an example, just briefly. So first, we developed a way to share that knowledge, develop that shared and common knowledge. So we currently have a 6-session, 12-hour foundational series that we do. And it does have an action plan that they develop. We check in, we have check-in so that we know they're learning, lots of different components to that. The next piece is that job embedded professional learning, where those individuals are asking us to come into their environment. Now, it is not every time they want. It's very organized. It has 6 sessions a year. They choose the goals. We look at the goals. We look at what that might look like. In one of the teams that I worked with, they had 3 classrooms in a building. We all did job embedded together. I would go there. I would do something in each classroom based on their goals and what they needed to learn. And then we would share out amongst the entire group what my answers were, what they learned, what their reflection was, so that we were learning multitude of things together as 3 classroom teams, and then the broader building team. And then if we're thinking about capacity building, what did those teams do with that information? And so we had some really fun things happening over the years, which again, we've shared in the past, about teams embracing other teams, sharing at a local level, a district level. And we had some teams begin to share at a national and international level, the things they were learning based on this model. So then we want to think about impact, right? That's a big deal right now. What does impact look like? So these are just kind of the components of our district and what we were doing and how we got started. But I want to show you, we looked at initial barriers so that we could start to figure out where to even start. And so some of those barriers, this is based on that participation model. So we looked at our policies. We had 40 years of understanding of the power of AAC, so that wasn't really a big deal for us. We, however, did have a candidacy model and a heavy reliance on AAC consultants that needed to be shifted. Staff knowledge was kind of all over the place, right? It was just kind of messy. We had huge pockets of people that really didn't even know where to begin, and then small pockets of center programs that had massive knowledge on how to support these students. And then our practices were really geared toward high incidence AT at the time. So we needed to do a lot of shifting in our current AAC practices. And so, some of the big changes were mindset shifts in staff attitudes. And then we got a huge increase in communication system requests, which wasn't really thrilling for our bosses, but it was amazing for us. We were able to put universal core in place in over 100 classrooms and talk about how that connects to literacy. So we had so much more attendance at kind of all of our PLs, but especially that connection of AAC and literacy. We began this tiered model of capacity building. We didn't start with everybody, but we saw a huge uptick in the implementation of AAC language and literacy. And then we were slowly getting much better at supporting those really complex kids. We were able to add another consultant. And then we were starting to get a lot of requests from LEAs, our local districts, for more PL to impact more of their students. We also saw huge changes in the skill level and implementation in our staff. So again, we're thinking about, as an influence, we're building capacity. We want people to share their story. We want to change mindsets. We want to expand that shared knowledge, right? We want to deepen implementation to a level that changes practice in classrooms, that truly changes and meets the IEP goals of these students. We want to create a communicatively expectant environment where everybody's expecting communication to happen in that environment and supporting it. Ultimately, we want to shift a culture. We want people to walk in and go, whoa, okay, I need to know about this. What's happening here? Why does everybody know what's happening? We want a culture to represent our thinking, our knowledge, our goals. So when we think about our students and the impact on students, they were given increased opportunities. We saw that greatly. We had more consistency across classrooms, buildings, the county. We saw quicker access to tools, strategies, and supportive learning environments. So even if we had a classroom that wasn't kind of up to speed, even in their opinion, we were within that building or district had somebody that could go and support them and get that going for them. What was the impact on staff? I'm going to make sure we have time for questions. Multiple opportunities to observe strategies and skills applied. So we had people going into each other's classrooms. We had building classrooms, inviting classrooms across the district that one day they would be bused a month into that person's classroom so they could on site show them how to do aided language input, how to do shared reading while, embedding AAC. Really powerful kinds of things that were able to happen. We had practice and feedback happening among peers with life or literacy coaches and AAC coaches and somebody from within the district that would pop over one morning a month and help them. What we loved a lot was the understanding that people understood the theory under the skill so that they could keep building those activities because they understood where we were going, what the underpinnings were of those strategies. I move something and then I can't see the next thing. Keep switching. I have to move my picture. What was the impact on the organization? So the larger and the smaller, what we would call organization, it truly did develop a culture. So we had our teams being asked by people across the state to come and influence them. They didn't need us. They became the influencers. They had developed a culture. We had people walking into buildings and calling me and saying, can you do in our building what they're doing in their building? Right? It accelerated the pace of change because so many more people were on board. We kind of laughed and said we created a black hole because the next thing we know, we had everybody in our black hole and it was expanding and expanding and we were working harder, right? And longer, but with much greater impact and influence. It fosters sustainability because they want to share what they're doing. They want to share the impact that they're having. And it reinforces implementation of those skills and strategies from within, not us coming in and talking about it, but them it bubbling up within. And what we found as consultants is they knew so much more than we did. So the next thing we knew, we're bringing them into our trainings to share their stories and their knowledge because we weren't doing it directly anymore, but they were. And that was incredibly powerful to watch. So ultimately, that impact should involve everyone, where team members are becoming influencers and continuing to impact separate from us, with us, in addition to us, students, families, staff, programs, where it truly is changing the culture and the climate and the atmosphere where they're doing their work. And the goal all along was to support students to become competent communicators. I did it with a little bit left so that I can look at these questions. Now, you should have already been all the way along filling out your action plan. Remember, you're a continual learner. And so you're thinking about what's my next step? Who am I going to talk to? How am I going to think about this? You could have people that are in your district or you're in your area that have already done some of this. Find who they are. Think about how you can begin to do that together, even if it's AT versus AAC versus literacy, the idea is the same. We're building a culture. We're creating a climate where everyone believes that everybody communicates, that everybody can learn to read and write, those, types of beliefs. So that's all I have from my formal presentation. I will start looking at these Q&As and see where we're going from there, and hopefully keep looking at your action plan. I can be relentless about this. I will just tell you, I can be incredibly annoying. You need to think about your next steps, make a plan. And now I want you to prioritize where you're going to start. Who are you going to have the first conversations with? Is it going to be about mindset? Do we need to think about, we got to change our mindset first before we can get to any of the rest? Or do we already have that? But boy, we've got to think about our professional learning and how we're going to do that. Okay, so was the team that you worked with multidisciplinary? We had lots of input from lots of different people. So we had people involved in literacy. We had people involved with like OTs and PTs. We had administrators. We had people that knew about UDL and thinking about universal supports. So yeah, we had a lot of different, we had teachers, we had SLPs, all part of this planning piece that we did over years. Could you share some of the universal AAC supports? Yeah, so we use large core boards. I used those 30 some years ago in my classroom. And so we started creating those. We used the Project Core modules. We were used kind of as a test to build, do some surveys and get some information so that Project Core could write that grant. And so we think in that vein. So we did a 32 core that we started with. We then increased it to 48 and 72, I think. And so we get those large core boards in the classroom. We used to put and still put some type of Go Talk in place with our 32 core. We put a 4-button Talkable in place so we can get students that have a bit of access challenges. We have a core flip book that's a no tech. We have our 32 core in just handouts that is no tech so that they can get started. We have half size core boards. We have core boards with removable symbols and not for very specific reasons, moving from an emergent to a conventional communicator. So those are the things we put in place. How do you encourage this model when you have certain teams providers that say, teach it better? Yeah, we encounter all of what you're saying in terms of preferences. We try to help people think about where that is going to be implemented and what that team needs to do. That team's going to be implementing it, not that outside therapist or not that individual person. So how do we choose something that we're going to get the most bang for our buck, not to in any way negate what that student needs? Not saying that, but oftentimes there's 3 devices that we could be using, and one of them the classroom team already knows and everybody's on board with, and the other one they don't at all. So we need to think with a bit broader lens, and there are people that really don't agree with that at all. And I fully understand that. I also think there's a way to move kids through to where we can get the staff all on board, which means we're going to get frequency of use through the ceiling or not, right? So we at least try to have those powerful conversations. Oh, I've got to look and see. We have some on our YouTube channel in terms of access to the 6 2-hour sessions. So I've got to see where we're at in terms of sharing that. But if you want to message me privately, I will let you know what that looks like at this point, because we've had a lot of changes. So that's an excellent question about the teams you're serving. So we often will start with the Communication Bill of Rights. So we start dancing around with that and saying, have you ever heard of this? Do you know what this is like? This is kind of our outcome. So we want to think about what we can put in place in your classroom so that when your students leave you, this is who they are. This is who they are as a communicator. I have done with Rachel Langley some things on expert versus collaborative model and on mindset that I believe are out there, but you could again reach out and I can share with you some of the stuff that we've already done. Mindset changes everything, right? If we want people to embrace strategies that are going to support the use of AAC, we have got to be thinking about it very clearly and all together. It is a belief system. Yeah, so our current YouTube channel is, I work for Oakland Schools. So it's Oakland Schools ISD, I believe. But again, you can reach out to me and I can send specifically those links to you. I don't mind doing that at all. And we're going to be producing a lot more videos very quickly. We have some team members that are so tech savvy. It's terrifying to me and so exciting. So yeah, we're going to be creating a lot more resources that you can get access to easily. So the team that we started with was our ISD team. So our intermediate school district team, and that's our job as employees. But then we very strategically, we did one PL and we shared it with all the directors and said, would you like to send somebody to our training that you would love to become a leader or an influencer in your district in AAC? And we started creating groups that we could connect to. And we also, but as an ISD, provided stipends for them to attend or goodies, right? People like we're in the field that everybody likes stuff. So we would sometimes do that. Sometimes during the day, we might strategically plan our connections for 45 minutes during lunch. So we got pretty creative about that, but we did find district leadership to be excited about that because AAC was growing dramatically and they were kind of behind the ball. And so they were excited about us supporting a design for leaders to start being developed. And again, we call them influencers. And so we also offered that job embedded. We would go into classrooms and the next thing we know, that district would say, oh, very cool. Okay, we're very excited about you supporting our teams. We're going to let that SLP or that teacher do some stuff with you because you came in and supported us so well. And again, if I'm not answering it completely, please reach out to me. Let's see. And so again, we initiated it at the large ISD level, but we also had building teams that we supported that initiated in their building or in their district that also developed very beautifully, separate from us. Do you have specific recommendations? So when we start with preschoolers, I would always start with Project Core, right? If you don't know about it, it's Project-Core. It was developed, the entire set of modules were developed with a $2.5 million grant at the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies at Chapel Hill, in Chapel Hill in North Carolina. And they have a powerful website and they will answer questions, all kinds of things that will support your learning. We even use Project Core as a year-long course study, and people would watch the modules and then we would do a Q&A to dig deeper into that. And that was one of the jumping off places or the on-ramps for us to start coming in classrooms and supporting those teams after they went through Project Core, which also supports emergent literacy. So again, that connection of AAC and communication being able to happen within an instructional strategy, if that makes sense. So obviously, okay, so do you have any suggestions for building capacity with AAC assessment? So we look at assessment a little bit differently. And so we do, right, that all these core, universal core supports, because what happens then is when it comes time to get a specific device for a student, that teacher and staff have all kinds of knowledge, right? They're already seeing how many times aided language input supports that student. We're already seeing either the combining, the use of many single words when we've been attributing meaning, and now we're seeing, words being combined and expanded. That gives us a huge bucket full of information that helps us figure out what's next. It also allows that team to give input into a device, into a system that what was said earlier, but I love this system best. Okay, but we have a classroom team and family that can fully embrace this, and it still is a robust communication system, right? So having that knowledge ahead of time, that information about how that student's interacting in universal AAC supports can really shift that assessment model pretty dramatically. How do you deal with a special ed teacher? So we had this a lot, not as much anymore, but we start wrapping their head around rights. So that's why we use a communication bill of rights. We also very, very clearly talk about the risk our students are in. Okay, we talk about letting them protest a bunch, even though they say, I'm done, I don't want to work anymore. Okay, but I heard you say no. So we're going to take a bit of a break, or we're going to change activities. Our kids that we serve have to be able to say no. Because if they can't say no to us in a comfortable, powerful environment, what are they going to do when someone wants to harm them? Right? That's the reality. We have to think about those statistics and say, you really want to be the person that stands in the way of that child keeping himself safe in an environment that you're not in? We have to press hard buttons here to get this conversation going. Okay, so we're already over. So I just want to thank you so much for being here. I will stay and answer questions if you would like, but I'm just so grateful that you wanted to hear this content that is so important to me. And again, reach out to me and I will do my best to answer your questions and help you move forward also. So it looks like, what are your thoughts and recommendations for using AAC with Gestalt language processors? So that's a complicated kind of topic right now. One of the things I tend to ask myself, I've been in the field a long time. I know when the word first came out, I know Barry Prezant's work. We've worked with lots of kids with autism for years. I really wonder how we apply the Gestalt language model to kids that are non-speaking at this point. So that is the question I would kind of leave us with. If we don't have any expressive evidence that would help us understand that they're Gestalt language learners, I'm wondering where we go with that. So we still have lots of questions to try to figure out when to decide that's what's happening. What about the strategies we have for echolalia anyway, right? To build that into more meaningful communication. So I think we have a lot more to do around figuring this out before we can really say this is the best practice or the most current practice around that topic. But it's an important topic. We've got to be thinking about it. I'm so grateful for the thank yous. I appreciate it. Hopefully it did impact you and help you think a little bit differently about all of this. Hopefully you'll use your action plan. I don't know if there's any more questions. I don't see any more. I hope it was worth your time to have this powerful conversation about building capacity and not having to be the expert every time.